Florida, the sunshine paradise. Beaches, palm trees, Disney, retirees, influencers, and the promise of a better life. But behind the perfect postcards, something is breaking. Quietly, rapidly. And almost nobody outside the state understands how bad it really is. Florida was once the symbol of escape, from high taxes, from cold winters, from complicated city life. But now, people are asking a terrifying question. Is Florida on the verge of collapse? Because the signs are everywhere. The real estate market is cooling, insurance companies are abandoning homeowners, and entire communities are becoming uninsurable. Not in 2050, not in 10 years, but right now. Home prices are no longer unstoppable. After the pandemic boom, sales are slowing, inventory is rising, and many cities are experiencing price declines. Cape Coral and Fort Myers have seen double-digit drops, making them some of the worst-performing housing markets in the entire country. Condos are losing value in the majority of major Florida counties, and sellers who once rejected offers are now begging buyers to negotiate. The fast-money Florida market is cracking. But that's not even the real problem. The time bomb is insurance. Florida has the most expensive home insurance in America, costing nearly triple the national average. Premiums that were $2,000 jumped to $6,000. And in some places $10,000 or more, in only a few years. Not because of politics, not because of hype, but because insurance companies don't want the risk anymore. They're pulling out, refusing renewals, or going bankrupt after repeated billion-dollar hurricane losses. When insurers leave, banks panic. When banks panic, the housing market falls. It's a domino effect, and Florida is standing right in front of the first tile. And meanwhile, the storms keep getting stronger. Hurricanes, flooding, storm surge, billion-dollar climate disasters, year after year after year. In the global climate risk rankings, Florida is one of the most vulnerable places on Earth. Major coastal zones are at risk of becoming unlivable without billion-dollar protections. Yet people keep moving there. Developers keep building. Prices keep rising. Until, suddenly, they don't. The Florida dream has collided with math, geography, and reality. A state built on endless growth now faces a question nobody wants to answer. What happens when the risk becomes too expensive to insure, too expensive to rebuild, and too expensive to ignore? This is not fear-mongering. This is the data, this is the trend line. This is the beginning of a story the rest of the country will soon be forced to confront. And if Florida, one of the most desirable places in the US, can break, then maybe the entire American model is more fragile than anyone wants to admit. If you want to understand Florida's collapse, follow the insurance trail. That's where the entire crisis begins and ends. Over the last few years, multiple insurance companies have fled the state or gone bankrupt, leaving millions of homeowners with only two options: pay unaffordable premiums or go uninsured in one of the most disaster-prone regions in the United States. The state-run backup plan, Citizens Insurance, has exploded in size, now covering over 1.3 million policies, a number experts call totally unsustainable. Why is this happening? Because the math stopped working. Florida faces billions in hurricane losses every single year, and reinsurers, the companies that insure the insurance companies, started raising their prices, tightening their rules, and backing away from Florida's coastline. When reinsurers pull back, private insurers collapse. When private insurers collapse, the burden shifts to the state. And when the state becomes the insurer of last resort, the entire financial system becomes one hurricane away from catastrophe. Meanwhile, Floridians are drowning in costs. Insurance premiums have tripled, HOA fees have exploded after post-Surfside safety laws, and property taxes spike as local governments try to cover infrastructure and storm damage. Some homeowners are now paying more in insurance and fees than in their mortgage. And when owning a home becomes financially impossible, the market breaks from the inside. Then comes the second punch. Hurricanes aren't slowing down. Ian, Idalia, Michael, Irma, each storm rewriting the map, wiping neighborhoods off the coast, causing tens of billions in losses. Streets flood even on sunny days. Storm surges reach places that never flooded before. Cities like Miami and Tampa are ranked among the most climate-vulnerable areas on Earth. And global investors are paying attention, not emotionally, just mathematically. Money goes where risk is low. Florida is becoming high risk. The third punch is more silent. People are starting to leave. You won't see it on glossy tourism ads, but the migration pattern is shifting. Families who move to Florida for the dream are discovering the reality: unpredictable storms, killer humidity, skyrocketing costs, and a financial system built on hope instead of stability. Some are cashing out and fleeing to Georgia, Tennessee, or the Carolinas, where insurance is cheap, storms are rare, and life is not a gamble every summer. Florida's economy is still growing, for now. But it's growing like a sandcastle, faster than everyone else, and also faster to collapse when the tide comes. One bad season, one direct hit on Miami, one more wave of insurers pulling out. That's all it takes. And deep down, the state knows it, banks know it, investors know it. The question is, how long can a paradise survive when the risk becomes uninsurable, the homes become unaffordable, and the climate becomes unstoppable? Because this is no longer about one storm, one city, or 1 year. This is about a model cracking in real time. And the rest of America is watching, wondering if Florida is a preview of their future. But Florida's crisis goes deeper than hurricanes and insurance. There is a structural fracture that nobody wants to admit. Much of the state was built on a fantasy that land value will always rise, that tourists will always come, and that the climate will always play nice. But reality is now breaking that illusion, brick by brick. Start with the housing market. In many parts of Florida, the dream is already deflating. Inventory is rising, listings sit longer, and price cuts are becoming the norm. Cities that were pandemic darlings, Tampa, Orlando, Cape Coral, Fort Myers, are now ranking among the worst performing housing markets in America. Why? Because you can't sustain endless growth when the cost of simply existing keeps exploding. Then there's the tourism threat. Tourism is Florida's lifeline. If visitors stop coming, the economy suffocates. And what do tourists fear more than anything? Chaos, high prices, storms, beaches washing away. Insurance companies know this, investors know this, and now, the tourism industry is quietly panicking. After Hurricane Ian, hotels and rentals across Southwest Florida saw their bookings collapse. Beaches disappeared, restaurants died overnight. The illusion of paradise shattered in a single week. But the biggest danger isn't economic, it's geographic. Florida is physically sinking, literally. Between rising seas and eroding coastlines, entire zip codes face a future where flooding will be a monthly event. Sunny day flooding now hits Miami without rain. Salt water is poisoning pipes, roads, and drinking water from beneath. Billions would be required every year just to defend the coastline, and nobody knows who will pay for it. Meanwhile, developers keep building luxury towers inches from the ocean as if physics can be negotiated. Investors flip condos like casino chips. Politicians smile for cameras and say everything is fine. But behind closed doors, engineers, insurers, and banks whisper the same fear. There will be a moment when the numbers no longer work. When the cost to rebuild exceeds the value of the land. When insurance disappears. When banks stop lending. When the market crosses a line it cannot uncross. Experts call it the climate tipping point. For Florida, that moment may already be approaching. And once a market loses confidence, collapse doesn't happen slowly. It happens all at once. A rush for the exits. A panic to sell. A silent migration away from risk. And a paradise that suddenly wakes up to a terrifying truth. You cannot build eternity on sand. So what happens when a paradise becomes unaffordable, uninsurable, and unstable? One word: exodus. A quiet one at first, but unmistakable. Families who moved for a cheaper, happier life are now leaving, or desperately wanting to. They can't pay $8,000 a year for insurance. They can't handle HOA fees higher than their mortgage. They can't live in fear that the next storm will erase everything. And here is the paradox. While some are fleeing, others are still arriving. Florida is experiencing a split. The wealthy can adapt, but the middle class cannot survive the financial pressure. Cash buyers from out of state can pay $700,000 upfront for a coastal property. But normal families, they're being forced inland or out of the state entirely. This is how a community breaks. Not with an explosion, but with a slow drip of people who say enough. Corporations are watching too. Insurance firms already left. Now banks, hedge funds, and institutional investors are quietly reducing exposure. You won't see it on the news, but the money is moving. And when capital escapes, collapse accelerates. Florida's leaders promise protection, seawalls, pumps, and billion-dollar resilience projects. But even those projects reveal the truth. If you must spend billions just to stay above water, the water is already winning. One direct hit on Miami or Tampa, one Ian-level storm on a major urban center, could trigger losses so big that insurers fail, citizens collapses, taxpayers get crushed, and the housing market implodes. This is not hypothetical, it's math, momentum, and history converging at the same point. And yet, the most chilling question is the one nobody wants to ask. What happens when an entire region becomes financially unlivable? Do cities die? Do people abandon the coast? Do investors let billions sink into the ocean? Because climate doesn't negotiate, insurance doesn't do charity, and markets don't care about paradise. Florida is running out of buffer, out of luck, and out of time. Florida now stands at a crossroads: paradise or cautionary tale, renewal or collapse, reinvention or retreat. The state can still fight back with engineering, policy, and innovation, but only if it faces reality instead of selling fantasy. Because the Florida story isn't just about one state. It's a warning, a preview, a mirror held up to every coastal city in America, and eventually, the world. If Florida falls, the shock will ripple through banks, insurers, real estate markets, tourism, and national economics. This is bigger than hurricanes, bigger than beaches, bigger than Florida. So the question is no longer, will Florida break? The question is, who will break first, Florida or the system around it? And if you think this ends here, it doesn't. Florida is only chapter 1 of a much larger story unfolding in silence. From California to New York, from the Gulf to the East Coast, insurance markets are shaking, coastal cities are flooding, real estate bubbles are trembling. The map of America is being redrawn in real time. The collapse doesn't come all at once. It comes piece by piece, state by state, shoreline by shoreline. Florida is just where the future arrived first. Want the next chapter? Then pay attention, because the storm has already started. And what comes next will change everything.